I'm Maura Carlin. I'm speaking to the new Town of Mamaroneck Administrator, Meredith Robson. She replaces longtime Administrator Steve Altieri, who actually was the first in the position, making Meredith the second in the position. So welcome, Meredith. I'm glad to meet you, and welcome to Mamaroneck.
Thank you very much. It's really great to be here.
You know, people often are confused between the difference between the supervisor and the administrator. So let me just start with, you were hired by the town board, which is an elected board, to be the administrator for the town. As such, what are your responsibilities?
So I think the best way to describe it, and you're right, the town board hired me, and they are my collective bosses, particularly the town supervisor. And the best way to describe it, I think, is that I deal with the day-to-day operations with all the departments, all of the nitty-gritty things that a local government does on a day-to-day basis, whereas the legislative board handles much more of the local laws, policies, general vision for the community, and particularly the town supervisor leads that effort. So for the most part, I'm doing the nitty-gritty day-to-day, and they're doing the higher level visionary, legal, all those sorts of things.
Now you come to Mamaroneck from the village of Ardsley. So I gather you are familiar with the complicated meshing of villages within towns and unincorporated sections of towns with differing school districts.
Yes, I am. Of course, it's from the other perspective, as you know, coming from the village, as you said. But yes, very familiar with how confusing the lines can be, both for ourselves and for residents to figure out where they live and who they get their service from, and who they need to contact for different things. So it is, in New York, it's an interesting setup.
And you started last month in August, and you're really experiencing, I guess, trial by flood and storm.
Yes.
So I guess we really should start by talking about the water issues, and you can distinguish between the town issues and the village of Mamaroneck issues if you need to, because the photos we see in the news largely are in the village of Mamaroneck, but the town suffered substantial flooding, particularly in the areas by the brook and
Yes.
the duck pond, among others.
Yes, actually, what you do see mostly is the village, and for good reason. They really have been hit very hard. But the town too, I mean, we are in the process now of assessing and trying to put numbers to the work that we have to do. And we are looking at a very expensive repair list. And there are a lot of things that most folks won't see. There are washouts, there are impacts to bridges that we have to deal with. So if you're
What are washouts? I'm sorry, what are washouts?
So where the road gets washed out, or the sidewalks, there's an issue with the sidewalks because of just the amount of water that came down. So we have a lot of infrastructure types of repairs that are necessary, but much of that will not be seen by, you know, the average member of the public unless they happen to live by those areas. And yes, the brooks, the lake were very heavily impacted in those areas. So we're in the process now of putting that all together, because the town, just as the village and any other community that's been impacted, will be filing claims with FEMA. And if you've ever dealt with FEMA claims, the detail is incredible that we need to put down, including, you know, GPS coordinates for all the areas. So it's a great deal of work to put that all together. And we have lots of departments involved, particularly highway and engineering on that front. And then we're also trying to assist the village in their cleanup efforts, because we have cleanup efforts as well, very substantial. And in fact, we're facing issues with the county their system is just being overwhelmed, the collection system for garbage. And so we're dealing with that now. We're working with the Larchmont Mamaroneck Sanitation Commission, trying to figure out ways to get all of this taken care of. And it's really an enormous issue right now, and one we're focused on.
Do you have an estimate of the dollar amount of damage in the town?
Don't quote me on this forever, but as of our initial look, and this is just for the infrastructure, this doesn't count the overtime involved, any of the equipment costs or anything like that that will be part of the claim. But infrastructure itself is probably in the neighborhood of $1 million, believe it or not. And that's on our end, not the village.
And is that something that we'll be looking at, that, you know, being put out to taxpayers, or do we expect to get full recovery from FEMA or some other source?
We certainly will look to get as much as we can from FEMA. They have a very difficult, very challenging process. So I can't promise we'll get it all back from them, and it will take quite some time. We're still dealing with waiting for funds to come back from COVID efforts. We were looking at Henri, but Henri was much less impactful to us than Ida was. So I don't know when that money will come. It is a very long process, but we are going to certainly look to get as much back as we possibly can.
So what things, and you may not know this yet, can be done to prevent this from happening again and again?
Oh boy, I think that's a loaded question, but I know that there was a major project that was designed by the Army Corps that would particularly help the village situation.
Correct.
I don't know that anything in particular can help with the type of storm that we experienced. I mean, that was a massive storm. There isn't anybody here. I've been here finished 5 weeks. And not one person that dealt with the storm said they'd ever seen anything like it before. So you do the best you can with resiliency efforts and shoring up your infrastructure, getting any kind of federal assistance, you know, Army Corps assistance and anything else that you can to fortify things. But this was a really difficult, very damaging storm. And unless you're looking globally at things to do, it's very difficult for a local government to do something by themselves.
Well, as I understand it, water levels can be lowered at the Sheldrake. I don't know how much that would help at the brook. Is it possible to look into other ways to lower it further or other mitigation?
We actually are responsible for the dam and the reservoir, and our highway folks had lowered it as much as possible. But the amount of water was just so substantial that the spillway was certainly roaring, and it almost, even though we lowered it as much as we could, it still almost came over the entire dam. So we did that, and it did help for some period of time. But when we had the amount of water coming through that we did, there was just no way to prevent that. But we do manage that on a regular basis when there are storms.
For people who need help, where in the town can they go?
If they're living in the town, they could certainly call town hall. They can give us a call. They can email us. All sorts of information is up on our website. We've been doing robocalls and email blasts out to folks. If they're in the village, they can certainly call the village. And there are informational resources available as well on their website. And even if they call the wrong place, anybody who answers the phone in either place will help out and try and provide direction as to, you know, where they can go for help.
Has power been restored throughout the town at this point?
Power has, yes. It's been restored. It took a while in certain areas, but we have been restored, yes.
I mean, I had hoped to ask you some questions that weren't related to flooding, so let me just try to sneak in one or two about what you're coming into this new position in a new community. Did you have some priorities coming in?
You know, my first priority when I go to a new community is to really just learn about the community, find out who the folks are, what they're involved in, what the community is all about, what the community needs are, working with the board on identifying some of those and listening to department heads. So really the first thing that I do is try and learn as much as I can about the community. And then, you know, certainly we're in budget season right now, although that seems a little put off at this point dealing with the storm, but it is budget season and we will be knee deep in that process as well. So certainly that's a priority. The comprehensive plan work that the board is hoping to move forward with, that'll be a priority. So I think, you know, getting to know the community, getting the budget done, working on the comp plan, I think those would be the top right now.
Well, I hope you will come back and speak to us again in more details about, what's going on in Mamaroneck as we get through this flood season with another rain day today. Thank you so much, Town Administrator Meredith Robson, for LMC Media. This is a community conversation, and I'm Maura Carlin.